The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Well, I'm back, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for your birthday wishes. I was gone on Monday and Tuesday celebrating my birthday, which was yesterday, June 5th. I turned 38 years old. I'm getting old. I'm getting old. But anyway, there are so many stories that I have to cover and not a lot of time because I've been gone. I have to start with the most recent happenings. President Donald Trump has commuted the sentence of 63-year-old Alice Johnson, and she had been serving a life sentence for a nonviolent drug trafficking charge or conviction. So he has commuted that life sentence, and Alice Johnson, was convicted and sentenced to life in 1996. What makes this story significant is that Kim Kardashian, the reality TV star, went to the president just last week and presented her case on behalf of Alice Johnson. And less than a week later, Alice her sentence was commuted. Now, to be sure, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Life sentences. Our prison system, our judicial system, our justice system is severely broken and it needs reform. And therefore, this is a good thing. However, this is not reform. I'm not knocking what the president did because it was a good thing. We will discuss why he did it, how it came about, and the limitations of an action like this. You really can't, you can't help but look at this and say, where are we in the world, in society now that you need to advocate to Kim Kardashian, have Kim Kardashian be an advocate for you? I mean, I don't, at this point, I don't really care how it gets done, right? If this is what we need to do to get some positive things out of this administration, then fine. Send someone else up there who the president is enamored with or is impressed with or the president is a fan of or whatever. Because you sure as hell know now that people see this as the formula to getting what they want from President Trump, they're going to be sending stars up there to get things done that they want done. So I'm not really saying this tongue in cheek, even though I am. I'm not saying this just to highlight the absurdity of it, which I am. But I'm also saying, hey, if this is what we have to do to get things done in the positive column, you sure as hell know people are going to be doing it in the negative column. And so, in terms of the case itself, Alice Johnson never tried to pretend as though she wasn't guilty of trafficking large amounts of cocaine back in the 90s. She made the case that she got into it because of hard times. But a life sentence for her role in it, which was not, there was no murder involved. There was no violent. It was a non-violent offense. And for her to get a life sentence was completely absurd at the time. And so the president is right in what he has done. The only question is why did it have to take Kim Kardashian to do it? I would ask the question of why this particular case was overlooked by President Obama or passed over by President Obama. That's also a facet in this conversation. I haven't found out any information as to why President Obama passed this over. But this is where we are. Here's the last piece. People, last week, people were making the case that we should not criticize this interaction between Kim Kardashian and Donald Trump, because if it happened to help prison reform or sentencing reform, then it's a good thing. Here's the thing. This was a single case that she was advocating for. Fine. Glad it's done. Thank you, Kim Kardashian, for helping this individual get her sentence commuted. But But that's not prison reform. And I'm speaking now not to Kim Kardashian or the president. I'm talking to people who are like, oh, she's fighting for prison reform. Why would you talk bad about her? Well, one, we weren't talking bad about her. Two, we now know that it wasn't prison reform that she was actually discussing. She's just calling in personal favors, which happens to be on the right side of history and beneficial to this individual person. But that's not systemic change. Right now, today, somebody is being sentenced in a draconian fashion for a nonviolent drug offense. That hasn't changed. So to be sure, Kim Kardashian wasn't there on behalf of prison reform. She was there on behalf of a grandmother who absolutely had no business being sentenced as long as she was sentenced. So just to put things in category. Now, there's so many other things that we have to cover today. So thanks to President Trump for commuting the sentence for this individual woman, Alice Johnson, who had no business being sentenced to life for her crime. That sentence has now been commuted, and we now know the formula to getting whatever we want. So we should send Kim Kardashian to the White House to ask for everything that we need. And I'm partially saying that tongue in cheek, but I'm also saying that in the sense of, hell, you absolutely know that Republicans are lining up whatever star they can to send into the White House to get whatever they want. If that's how we have to survive these last 2 years or 2.5 years of President Trump, then so be it. So the president of the United States, who has invested all of his political capital into making sure that black NFL players in particular stand proudly at attention and salute and put their hands over their heart to support the national anthem, that president, who is uber patriotic, doesn't even know the words to God Bless America. Yesterday at the event that he uninvited the Philadelphia Eagles, the championship team, he uninvited them from it. And so he said, we're going to show up and we're going to be super patriotic. He got up there to sing God Bless America and realized, oops, I don't know the words. I have to make a comment on the fact, on this fact. Donald Trump is one of those people who thinks that it's just going to magically come to his head. He's so confident in his abilities that he thinks that he just magically is going to know all the words. You know, anybody in their right mind who doesn't know all the words to a song, but also know that hundreds of millions of people are watching every move that I make, will just sit there with their mouth closed and their hand over their heart or whatever. But Donald Trump, no, he's brilliant. He knows all the words. He has all the words, and it's just going to come out of the, through osmosis. It's just going to appear in his brain, right? That's number one. Number two, it really doesn't matter that he doesn't know these words, except for the fact that he's trying to place all this emphasis on the lack of patriotism, which forced patriotism is really fascism, but that's an entirely different conversation. He's putting all this emphasis on the lack of patriotism from black players when he himself doesn't even really know the words to these songs, when he doesn't even put his hand over his heart. There's plenty of pictures of Donald Trump not putting his hands over his heart for the national anthem. He doesn't even know the words to the national anthem. But this is all about Donald Trump making a political play, as well as trying to assert this power dominance over black NFL players. In a deposition with Jerry Jones, it was stated that Donald Trump spoke to him and spoke to the owners and said that this was a winning issue for him. He understands that he can rile up his base with this. And he's going to continue to rile up his base with this because he's all about using division to score political points. And because he understands that's what his base really is. That's who his base really is. They have a deep-seated hatred for black people in this country. They will never say it directly. They will go all the way around it, do everything they possibly can to avoid ever being called a racist. But at the end of the day, it's about them being able to try to force black people to do things. Number one. Number two, to silence our protest and to silence our dissent. So this all started as a result of Donald Trump disinviting the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is what he said on Twitter. He said, quote, "The Philadelphia Eagles football team was invited to the White House. Unfortunately, only a small number of players decided to come, and we canceled the event. Staying in the locker room for the playing of our national anthem is as disrespectful to our country as kneeling. Sorry." So I talked about this on the patrons post on yesterday, the morning analysis. And this, again, is exactly what Donald Trump, this is who he is, and this is where he exists. This is all he really knows how to do, is to divide the country. There's a clip of Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr speaking about Donald Trump doing this exact thing. Take a listen in.
It's not surprising. I think, the president has made it pretty clear he's going to try to divide us, all of us in this country, for political gain. It's just the way it is.
And that's exactly what Donald Trump has done here. Donald Trump is using division along racial lines. He's creating racial animus. He's stirring it up. That's already the animus that's already there for political gain, because he understands nothing satisfies his base more than being able to slam on black protest. The number one thing these people, the front line in the culture war right now is white Americans, primarily conservative white Americans, being able to look at black people and say that you have absolutely no reason whatsoever to protest, that there's nothing wrong in this country, that police brutality is a figment of your imagination. That's the number one goal, and that's the front line of the culture wars right now. And so Donald Trump knows this, and he also knows that if he can continuously feed his base this vitriol, that he would always be able to score points with them no matter what. This is his way into being able to pardon himself. Right? Later on the same day, he tweeted this out. He said, earlier in that day, he stated, as has been stated by numerous legal scholars, I have the absolute right to pardon myself. But why would I do that when I have done nothing wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? The president of the United States understands that the only thing that matters to his base is that he keeps winning the culture wars, or at least keeps fighting the culture wars. They don't care about the economy. They don't care about the fact that these tax breaks are going to break them in the long run. They don't care about the Russia investigation. They don't care about any of those things. They don't care about it to the extent that he is now floating the idea that he can pardon himself. All that matters, all that absolutely matters, is that he is able to slam dunk on black protest. All that matters is that he's able to slam dunk on black protest in this front line of the culture wars. They will turn a blind eye to everything else. And as it turns out, they don't really care that the president himself is not patriotic. They don't care. He's emblematic. He's everything that they want to be. They want to be rich. They want to be able to be politically incorrect and go to the top of any of their industries. They want to be Donald Trump. And so he literally said it, and I know he means it, and I firmly believe it now. He could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and they will still support him. I tweeted the other day that he could literally piss on the Constitution and Republicans would be like, yeah, that's our guy because he's owning libs and he's so politically incorrect. So no matter what, I want to dovetail this into the last conversation about Alice Johnson and this pardon, that this commutation that the president just gave. No matter how many individuals the president of the United States pardons, they're only going to go so far, or commutes their sentences. He's only doing it for performance, because at the core of what Donald Trump is the divider in chief. He is there to divide us along racial lines for his political benefit, and to the detriment, the actual tangible, real detriment of human beings. That's all Donald Trump is. So no matter how many black people he pardons or gives commutations to, he doesn't actually care about black people only in so much as he can use us politically. Period. because 99.9% of his other actions demonstrate that he has either direct animus towards black people, or he's willing to use the animus of his idiotic supporters, their animus towards black people, in order to get political gain so that he can get away with everything that he wants to get away with. That is the MO of this president. He may not be Nope. I'm going to stop myself right there. I was going to say he may not himself be a racist or a white supremacist, but it's the actions, it's what you do that defines you. So his actions, by stirring up this animus, by using this divisiveness, creating a new problem with the NFL, right? Creating a new problem that did not exist in order to keep playing this game to the benefit of his politics or to the benefit of his white racist supporters, to the detriment of black people. That what you do defines you. Donald Trump is the white supremacist in chief, the divider in chief. But water's also wet.
It concerns me that so many voices within the Democratic Party are going so far to the left. And I ask myself, how are we going to pay for all these things in terms of things like single payer, or people espousing the fact that the government is going to give everyone a job? I don't think that's realistic. And I think we've got to get away from all of these falsehoods and start talking about the truth and not false promises.
That was the voice of Howard Schultz, the former chairman of Starbucks and the former CEO of Starbucks, saying that he's really scared about the fact that America, that the Democratic Party is moving so far left. He's essentially subtweeting Bernie Sanders here. If this was Twitter, that would be a subtweet when you want to talk about a person, but you don't want to call them by name. He listed out things specifically that are being advocated for by the progressive side of the Democratic Party. Higher education, everybody gets a job, increase the wages to $15 an hour. He's mentioning that entire category. He didn't mention the wages specifically, but he's mentioning that entire agenda of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Schultz is a Democrat. He is considering, now that he's stepping down from Starbucks, he's considering public service, which translates into he wants to be the president of the United States. He also probably firmly believes that because Donald Trump is the president, that there's no reason in hell he shouldn't be able to be president. And he's not factually wrong. However, this shows you that there's still a very strong side, a contingency in the Democratic Party that wants to be pro-business, really, that doesn't even encapsulate it all, right? But pro-business is a part of it. And Howard Schultz has a problem. Howard Schultz wants it both ways. He wants to be a great Democratic leader, and not a small D, but a big D. He wants to be a part of this machine. The entire 30-minute interview on CNBC was really just his foray into running. It's the perfect timing. He's going to run for president. He's going to run for something. And he wants to attack Donald Trump, but he does not want to address Donald Trump's economic problems. And he does not want to address that the core of what the Democratic Party is now attacking Donald Trump on is around tax policy, because he doesn't want to upset his friends. Instead of me explaining, take a listen into what he said himself about Donald Trump's tax breaks.
I really did not believe that the majority of companies in America were going to take a corporate tax cut from 35 to 21% and do all the things that the administration was spewing about in terms of advancing the economy and creating jobs and doing all these great things. And I said most companies were going to give it back to the shareholders. And what we decided to do is that almost 50% of the benefit that we had, we gave to our people. I didn't give credit to the administration for that. I gave credit to the fact that the leadership of Starbucks did the right thing.
So this is the problem that Howard Schultz is going to have. There, he's trying to distance himself from Donald Trump's tax cuts, because he knows that if he's running for president, he has to run against Donald Trump's tax cuts, right? But when pressed on the question by someone else from CNBC, I didn't catch this guy's name, but when he was pressed about the question, when he was questioned rather about where he was going to go with these tax breaks, this is when his real agenda actually came out.
I mean, if we end up growing at greater than 3% this year, would you repeal the Tax Reform Act? Would you raise taxes on corporations back to where they were if you were president?
Well, I don't want to talk in the hypothetical about what I would do if I was president, but let me try and say this in my own way. I think the greatest threat domestically to the country is this $21 trillion debt hanging over the cloud of America and future generations, and the fact that interest rates are going up. We're going to be paying close to over $400 billion in interest expense, which I think is the number one or number two issue in terms of federal expense to the country. The only way we're going to get out of that is we've got to grow the economy, in my view, 4% or greater, and then we have to go after entitlements.
Someone please tell me the difference between this Democratic billionaire and Paul Ryan. I mean, that last line there is literally something that you would hear from Paul Ryan, that we have to take care of the deficit. He won't answer whether or not he's willing to raise these taxes back, which is a great way to fix the deficit problem that Paul Ryan created, and Paul Ryan and Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell created. He won't address that because he knows if he says that, then, really, how does he distinguish himself from Bernie Sanders then? Because Bernie Sanders is coming forward. The question that was at hand was was a comparison between redistribution, right, which they don't call it socialism anymore because they know nobody cares if they try to use the boogeyman of socialism. So the question that the CNBC anchor was asking was like, well, should we give more capital to Wall Street? Should we give more capital to the private sector? Or do we want to redistribute it by raising taxes back? Now, in the earlier segment, he talked about the fact, Howard Schultz talked about the fact that he did not believe that Donald Trump's tax breaks were going to be trickled down to the workers, and that what he did at Starbucks was uniquely different because no one else was really going to be willing to do that. So he knows at the core of the tax problem of the tax plan that Donald Trump rolled out, there is a problem in that it's not going to stimulate the economy the way they think. It's not going to trickle down to workers. And subsequently, there's going to be a decline in tax revenues, which means we're going to increase the deficit. Yet he's perching his entire platform on this blue dog, economically conservative Democratic era, right? Because they want to make this is something the Democrats always do. After Republicans get in and they write the biggest checks that they possibly can, creating the largest deficits that they can, Democrats always come back and try to say that we are going to be fiscally conservative. And so he's using this fiscal conservatism as a platform to stand on to become president of the United States, even though he's not going to admit that yet. But this is his platform. He said it multiple times in this interview that he's going to be fiscally conservative, yet he's not willing to say that he's willing to raise taxes back. Instead, what he does is he takes the talking points of Paul Ryan and he says that we've got to grow the economy at 4%, which generally is translated in all of these sectors, in all of these conversations, that's translated as even more tax breaks. And then he says we have to go after entitlements. I mean, this is is this your Democratic hero? Is this your Democratic king? I mean, Howard Schultz, this era of Democrats, it's gone. It's gone. Bernie Sanders is leading the charge, and this is all the more reason why, as much as I was not in favor of Bernie Sanders running for president, I will support him because we have to go further to the left. There are things we can afford, the wars that we spent trillions of dollars on over the last generation, then we can afford every single program that Bernie Sanders is recommending. Single payer. Hell, we can afford universal basic income. But we have a contingency of Democrats who are still there, who are pro-business to the detriment of labor, right? I'm going to complete that phrase because you can be pro-business without being to the detriment of labor, but you have Democrats who are pro-business to the detriment of labor. And Howard Schultz is one of them. Listen to his words, right? Listen to what he said. You're going after entitlements. Do you know how many workers right now still depend on these entitlements because corporations don't pay what they should pay? That everybody's not Starbucks, and you're not going to be able to force I mean, unless we seize the means of production, you're not going to be able to force these corporations to give people a raise such that they don't need the safety nets. Walmart, Amazon, Disney, all of these major corporations that you're counting on generating this 4% GDP every year, they are not going to give their workers sufficient wages unless we demand it. So he's got himself in this feedback loop, this paradox where he wants to be against Donald Trump's tax plan because that's the way he can win. He's going to have to say that help. Nancy Pelosi is saying that. I don't think Chuck Schumer is not really saying it that much, but a lot of the leadership of the Democratic Party, whether or not they benefit from the tax breaks personally, financially, they are opposed to Donald Trump's tax breaks, if for no other reason than it's good politics, right? And notwithstanding the fact that it's absolutely the thing to be against. I mean, out of all the things that Donald Trump is doing, everything that he does is going to be detrimental for generations to come. So I can't even finish that sentence in good faith, because everything that he does is going to be detrimental to our economy and to our people, to social justice, to progress, to freedom. Anyway, that just like sucked the life out of me right there real quick. But he wants to be able to run against Donald Trump's tax plan without committing to raising those taxes back. He wants his cake and eat it too. He doesn't want to alienate Wall Street, right? He's on CNBC, right? He doesn't want to make them skittish. He doesn't want to make them think that he's some type of Bernie Sanders. And so what does he do to solving his big problem of presenting himself to be the fiscal conservative when he could say that we're going to raise these taxes back because corporations, like he knows, corporations are not going to distribute those benefits to their workers. They're going to distribute those benefits to their shareholders. And thus it's going to still be a problem in the long run for our economy, because we know that workers and the middle class, they are the ones who are going to stimulate the economy. And therefore, if we stimulate the economy, then yes, we can get somewhere closer to 3%, stay above 3% and get to, I doubt we ever get to 4%. But he's not willing to say that because he doesn't want to alienate Wall Street. This is the triangulation where we get the long end of the shaft. Right? This reminds me of the Bill Clinton triangulation, where the middle class and the working class and people who actually depend on the safety nets, they get the shaft, economically speaking. There's a video out of Mesa, Arizona, of 4 police officers who practically jump. I mean, and when I say jump, I mean that in the gang sense. They assaulted a man who was complying with everything that they asked, everything that they said. And it is disturbing to watch. There's no audio, and so I can only describe it for those of you listening to the podcast. But better yet, I'm going to put on the police chief, his reaction to it as he described it. Listen to him as he describes this incident.
What happens is an officer arrives, he runs into 2 individuals that are on the same floor, on the 3rd floor, and he goes ahead and gives them very calm direction to hang on. He asks one of them to sit down. A few more officers arrived via the elevator that this happened. And because there was allegation that there was weapons involved, the individual was frisked. No weapons were located, and then the individual was asked to move away from the railing, because it's 3rd floor, move away from the railing, stand by the wall, and then it asked to sit down. When the person didn't sit down, that our officers then engaged in use of force to make them sit down. I don't feel that our officers were at their best. I don't feel that this situation needed to go in the way that it went.
Now, the police chief saying that that the officers were not operating at their best is the understatement of the year. He also said that they used force to make this guy sit down. In the video, when you watch the video, you see that this was not use of force to make him sit down. This was use of force to knock him the hell out. Robert Johnson is the victim, right? The young man. You can see it in the video. You see the police officer basically using Muay Thai, kickboxing, and then punching to knock this man clean out, and he falls. The man slides down the wall onto the ground, practically unconscious. The man had no weapons because they frisked him. The man had done nothing wrong. He was on a phone on the 3rd floor of his apartment complex. He did everything the police officer said, with one exception. When they told him to sit down, he started scooting down, but did not go all the way down. And their reaction to that was an all-out assault. Looking at the video, these are not police officers. This is a gang. This is a gang of thugs jumping someone. Like some type of retaliation for something else that happened previously. So the police chief, who seems to be on the right side of the equation here, he's downplaying it significantly because this was an all out. I mean, this was something so cliche of a bad cop movie that they wouldn't even put it in the movie because they were like, oh, nobody would believe it. That's how ridiculous this clip is. And I know it's not his job to be as bombastic as I am, but don't play it down like that. And these are the ramifications. This is what he said is happening so far.
As soon as this event came to us, we took steps to have the officers removed from active service and essentially placed on administrative assignment while this case is being investigated.
So it's been investigated. They're on administrative leave. One last thing that I want to say about this. In the clip, you see one of the officers is a person of color. I can't tell if he's black, if he's Hispanic. I have no idea, but he's a person of color. But that makes no difference. I think we all are, at this point, are past that ridiculous argument that if the person beating us is a person of color, then that diminishes the reality of the systemic part of systemic racism as it pertains to police brutality. I think we all should be mature enough to be past that, even though I do know full and well that conservatives are going to weaponize the fact that one of the officers was a person of color. They're going to use that as a means of saying, see, there's really nothing going on here in terms of systemic racism. It's an individual cop problem. That's what they're going to say. But in reality, no, this is systemic. This is system wide. This is police training. This is this is their belief that they can get away with these types of things. That's a part of the systemic part of systemic racism. That's the part of, and again, actually, let me dovetail that a little bit better. This is not even just about systemic racism. This is about systemic abuses by the police that happens in every single community, disproportionately in communities of color, disproportionately in the black community, but it happens in every single community, and it's perpetrated by almost every ethnicity, race, whatever. And that's because the problem is with our policing agencies and the police culture, which is supported and undergirded by a system of white supremacy and racism. They will never turn and look at the policing agency. By they, I'm saying a good percentage of Americans would never look at the policing agency and say, there's a problem here. Because if they did that, they would have to actually think about what we've been saying all these years. And so what they've been willing to do is to turn a blind eye to the police abuses in their community so that they never have to say a word about the police abuses happening in the black community. They would rather their own people, white Americans, get beat down, shot by police officers, and never challenge the system simply to avoid giving any validity or lending any credence to what Black Lives Matter has been saying. And this should show you why it's so easy for Donald Trump to make so much hay out of the NFL protest against police violence, because he's dealing with a population that would rather see their neighbor get shot by police and do nothing about it than to ever believe or say or anything, agree to anything that Black Lives Matters is fighting for. That's the caliber of people that we are dealing with. Donald Trump knows this, and this is why he's added yet another skirmish in the culture wars by creating a new problem, saying that staying in the locker room is not good enough, or it's also disrespectful, because he needs this new skirmish to keep feeding them. Without a constant supply of bigotry and hatred and something to be angry about, conservatives might actually have a moment of clarity, if you would, to actually see what they've been fighting against is actually something that would help save some people in their community. But the way you keep them from ever seeing that is by constantly and relentlessly feeding them the bigotry that they need to stay blind to the truth. That's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for all of the birthday wishes. You guys rock. I love you as much as you love me. I love you more. Have a great week. I'm sorry. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Thank you.